I asked Claude a question while I was building something the other day. A simple question. Can you keep working through files in a folder until the list is done? And Claude said, yes, which led me to keep asking questions. And what came out of that conversation was way bigger than either the questions I was asking or the program I was working on. Two skills, a full development workflow built entirely by talking to Claude. Here's what I want to show you. Claude is really good at building tools for itself, and you build them by having conversations. I'm going to show you the workflow I built, how I built it, and why this matters for whatever you're working on. Because if you've ever thought, I wish Claude could just handle this for me, it probably can. You just have to ask. Okay, let me share with you very briefly the problem. This is kind of the pattern that I think we all use today. So the application that we'll be working on is this one back here. I'm sure if you work with your systems, you kind of quickly look at a screen and go, oh, that and this and this and this. What do I do with all of those? Okay, so if I come back here and I see that the system's already building, it's already working, right? And I might come in here and add a new thing that says, yeah, move the description from the right side. We don't want the description on the right side panel when we're in full screen mode, only when we're in a kind of a mobile responsive width. So there we dropped a huge request, of course, inside of something that was already working, right? I didn't have a better place to put it. It's when I came up with the idea. So that's what you're seeing here. Definitely not ideal. If I have another idea. So one of the things that I was noticing is the description or the information on the right panel is overlapping with the copy icon. I want to make sure that we create enough space that that copy icon always kind of is standalone. It's not underlapped or overlapped in any way. Right, so now we have two new requests that are kind of distinctly different requests, have some dependencies and everything else. All of a sudden, what we've got building up here is working on a certain piece of work, and we've now just thrown two new pieces of context at it. The system has to step back and say, okay, let me replan this. Hang on, let me think about what's going on here, because that doesn't necessarily sound like the best path forward that we do all of these at the same time. It interrupts and says, I was in the middle of planning this. How would you like me to handle this? You've mentioned two other things. This is not the way to work. It was in the middle of doing work. I need to leave it alone and let it finish the work. Okay, what's another way to do this? Well, I might come here. I usually create a docs folder. So very often when I'm coming up with these new ideas, I might come up with an ideas MD file that I would create and just start pasting in my ideas. There's the two different ideas that we have. I can save this and then keep working, looking at other things, whatever I might not like, come back and add these in as more ideas when the builder is ready. So I'm really waiting for it to complete. Okay, so this led me to an idea. And this is what I was describing earlier, is I came to the system and said, well, if I kept saving these ideas one at a time and just started saving them as single files in this docs folder, then maybe if I had its own special folder like requests, I could tell Claude itself, go read all the requests one at a time, work through it, and when you're finished, go check if there's more and keep working. And that's where I asked it, can you just work on a set of files and kind of complete it? Once it said yes, I was off to the races. Then we started designing the concept of what folder would it be in, how would it move it so that it knew it was working on it and no other agent would pick it up. What does it do with it when it's complete? What happens if it has questions? All kinds of other things came up because I saw that all I need to do is create a single file that it can work from, basically a queue that it's working from, and then everything else becomes the standard operating for kind of software development. And the last remaining step of all of this was kind of coming up with the idea that what I could do very easily is let's open up another Claude over here. If I open up another Claude, I now have a completely different context over here that I can have conversations into. I don't have to write things into files myself. I can come over here and say, capture this, and that will write the thing. Now, this doesn't quite work, so I needed some slash command or something else. What comes to the rescue but skills? Everybody likes skills these days. I thought, why not? I'll write a skill for this side that just says, when I have information for you to capture, I want to be able to use a slash command or something. You'll capture it and put it into the right folder. And in the other panel, I just want to be able to say, yeah, go work on all the files. Do what you do. I'm going to basically leave you alone and you just keep building over there while I'm capturing on this side. Any new idea, I drop over here, create a new one. That's it. That's the whole thing. And so it is a very interesting kind of pattern, and it has really been terribly useful for me. I've got it working for an hour and a half at a time over 25 or so kind of changes all within a list. And they were not surprisingly kind of all successful because what's happening is these are starting to be solved in a more atomic way. And so there's some fundamentals that I want to hand off here. Okay, I want to talk to you briefly about a few of the things that I'm doing here, but really as much as anything, I'm not necessarily saying this is a work pattern everybody needs to use. It is something like the Ralph Wiggum work process and other work processes out there that are kind of working at a task level to work through a series of named tasks in files, work through them, change statuses, etc., run tests. This one is a little bit different in a couple ways, but it's less important that it's different than those. If you're having success there, then you've already seen the light with regard to that. What I really want to hand off here is this was done with just a conversation. I, of course, did not write any code because that is my new pattern. And I just had a conversation with Claude again and again saying, let's write an action that does this, and let's write another action that does that. And how about if the first action, when it gets two items, it knows how to break them apart. Unless they're related to one another, keep those together. We want to be able to create multiples, depending upon what the user is asking for, lots and lots and lots. Those conversations turn into basically a PRD session. I'm actually telling it, here's what I want, here's what I'd like it to work like, my workflow. Those workflows are everywhere. It doesn't have just to do with Claude Code. It doesn't just have to do with kind of creating software. So your workflow mechanisms, anything that you're doing and you feel like, I wish something would be paying attention to me here and know when I mean this versus that, that's a skill. So I want to talk a little bit very briefly about skills here. Claude Code and many other places now support skills. Claude does a great job of supporting them. It, of course, is the originator from Anthropic. But I would say that using skills in the same way that you kind of used something like slash commands in the past, if you've used those, it is fundamentally valuable. So certainly start asking for a skill if you can. If you can open up Claude Code today and just ask it to build a skill for you to respond in one way when you ask it a certain question. When I ask you to tell me a joke, then tell me you don't tell me jokes, whatever it might be, and see how skills work. Once you realize you just have to have a conversation with Claude to make any skills, you'll start realizing how easy it is to kind of create, let's call it automation. It's kind of workflow processing that you're starting to create inside of your editor. And this is stuff that people have tried to solve with software for years. How do you create plugins on top of things like Visual Studio Code or something like that to really manage your own workflow? You can do it just with natural language saying, let's build a skill around this one thing that I keep doing. And that's all I did. I want to hand that off very clearly to say it is less about this workflow, this do work workflow that I'm talking about, and much more about go build your own software for when you're building software. Okay, so I really want to hand off the do work kind of skill to you so that you can use it. If you go by, I'll have it in the show notes below, but if you go by do work on my GitHub, you'll see that there is a simple command here, npx add skill, and this repo. So all it's really doing is looking at any repo and trying to install skills. This is something that Anthropic wrote to be able to install skills very easily. It's kind of fantastic. So if we drop down into that same folder and we do npx add skill, it will come up and ask a few questions of what do you want us to do? Do you want us to detect all the different agents? And I would say pretty much take the default options. I install these skills generally globally if I think that I'm going to use them in multiple projects, and I create so many projects that's commonly the case. So I'll install it globally and let it symlink, which just basically means check it out somewhere and it looks like it's global. That's it. Now when you go back into Claude, you'll have this slash command do work. And do work is super simple. Pretty much, if you just say do work, it will start working on any of the tasks. So if I said do work, it's looking into a known folder called do work, that's this folder here, and looking for any request documents that haven't been finished. That's all it's going to do. It's going to say there's no pending requests in the queue. What would you like to do? Add a request or start the work loop, which basically is the thing that's kind of looking for requests. No reason to start the work loop. So if we said we want to start a new request, let's do work, and then take one of those items that we were talking about earlier. Let's steal this one. So I am going to say, yep, I'm going to add to that work queue using do work, and it's asking me if I can write everything else. So this is just a standard mechanism for a workflow. It's going to go and create a file inside of this do work folder that is the actual request. The intent of the request is to not lose any of the nuance from what was asked, but not do any of the planning. This is not when the planning is done. Capture is very fast. And then in the work loop has some fundamentals that are very, very interesting that I think are worth talking about. So when it goes and does work, this job, the capture job, knows to say, if you give me a whole bunch of items together, I will figure out if they belong together and create a request. Or if they're kind of separate and should be written, executed, and tested separately, then I'll create separate tasks for it. So when I say tasks, I really mean requests. A lot of these systems work at the task level. And I think that's a mistake because there's a lot of times where multiple items, multiple tasks really are best done together in cooperation with one another. Let's imagine you said, I want to change the blue button or the send button to blue, and I want to change the cancel button to blue, and I want to change the delete button to blue for some reason. Right? That might end up in some systems as 3 separate tasks. Since you're not descriptive about what blue to use, it's entirely reasonable to think that it might choose a different blue every single time, right? It's got to decide some of these things. If it's within one workflow, it's highly likely that it will choose the same blue. So sometimes these tasks need to be together. That's what the do is doing. The work is saying, okay, I'm going to get a task. When I get that request, I'm going to look into it, figure out how complicated it is. If I need planning, I will plan that. If I don't need planning, I won't. I'll just kind of send it through as a one-shot. But when I do the work, I'm going to do the work in a sub-agent. And this is where Claude Code really enters in and is kind of immaculate. So Claude Code has this mechanism to kick off sub-agents to do work in a new context. And then you can send different context into it to work on, and it responds with its final, response from its work. So essentially, we kick off a planning sub-agent. What comes back from that planning subagent will go back into the work subagent. And then every single time that we do a piece of work, it gets a new context. It would be the same as coming to one of these and saying clear, and now I'm going to work the next item. And that is really an unlock. Now we have no more context pollution. Now, if things need to share a context, that's a different challenge. But in this way, at least, everything has its own nice, clean context. I think that's really an elegant way to do it. And by the way, Claude Code gave me an idea of not using the planning subagent inside of the builder subagent. It's going to get complicated. So I was creating a builder subagent, and I had it asking the question, does this need to be planned? If so, create a subagent. That can create infinite loops of kind of agents potentially and kind of run away with tokens and things like that. If you've ever seen tokens kind of disappear when you start using these systems, very often something like that's occurring. And it said, how about if we flatten it and create an orchestrator pattern out of our top agent? And it just knows the run loop, and it knows how to call the planner, it knows how to call the evaluator, the executor, and the builder. And that's it. And so all of those things are kind of these subagents that it kicks off and does. Really kind of an excellent pattern. All right, so I say, let's see this thing cook. So here we have one Claude Code. Let's open up a second one. We'll call him work. And we will come over to this guy and call him do. Great. And we have our application running. We still have our same problems, no changes yet. So let's come over here and say we want to do work. And now I'm just going to drop in both of those ideas that we had before. So this will kick off and create 2 tasks for us, and then we'll get it started cooking. Oh, and so here's an example. I was thinking it was going to create 2 different things, and it realized those are related enough that it could create 1 request. So good example of it making some decisions that this is really the same surface area. Let's just create 1 request. But let's get the work loop going. So let's do work and just tell it to start working. Okay, great. So now it's back there. I'm going to collapse these 2 so that we can kind of pull these things up close to one another and start exploring a little bit. Okay, so I don't really like the disclosure on the left side description. So when the description is standalone and we're in kind of web mode, I would like that description to just be a label. It doesn't need to be able to collapse. There's no reason for that to be a collapse region. We also seem to have a copy icon in the description on the left when it's in web mode, and I think that that's also being occluded by the text. So we need to make sure that we can always see the copy icon there as well. Dude, vibe. Okay, so I've always kind of hated the header here. I like the name and the avatar. That works pretty strong. And I don't mind the stats. I don't love the add tags and the description items hanging out there. They're always kind of bare like this and feel out of place. They feel like they're just taking up space for no reason, as they very often are.
Dude, vibe.
Okay, and so that's us kind of putting in a bunch of different requests all at once, again and again, and then it's creating these requests one per. It's been completing this whole time. I don't know if you've been able to hear that call out, but it's been archiving and completing all of the requests that it's been working on. The screenshots that I've been sharing are also being saved. So it's got kind of a full pattern that I can kind of look back and see what was changed. Even if something doesn't build quite right, I can go back and tell it was a piece of work that it did. It should check the archive to figure out what the plan was, etc. So it really has some value from a workflow standpoint, and it just continues to work. So if I put enough of these requests in, it will work as long as there are things here, or tokens exist. All right, so the handoff here, as you heard, is really allow Claude to go explore building tools for you. Have conversations with it, start building skills, as they're a lot more than just kind of a specific access to Notion or updating your database or something like that, though they can do those quite well as well. Skills can also really solve problems in your current workflow. If the project you're working in is just 3 or 4 sets of meetings and you have all the notes there, and you're going to be doing the same thing to those notes again and again, that becomes a skill. It's very easy to say, hey, Claude, we seem to keep doing this one thing. Can you build a skill for me? And then, of course, if you need a work loop, I would say this is a pretty good place to kind of look, because the other thing you get to do once you install this is you get to start asking for updates, saying, well, I don't really like how it names the files, or I want to work on 3 requests at once, or just delete all the requests. I want to be able to say that to it. Whatever you might want to add, this is available to you. So I hope that you saw something interesting here. Really what I want to hand off was how amazing it is sometimes just to ask the tool, what can you do, and try to stretch it a little bit yourself. You'll really realize everything out here is really pliable these days. Thanks for coming along for the ride on this one, and I'll see you in the next one.